Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Motes. Summer is finally here. At least it feels that way where I live here in West Virginia. It's hazy, hot, and humid, and there's a chance of a thunderstorm every afternoon. And the pollen seems to be even worse than it was back in May. This is absolutely my least favorite time of the year. I can't wait for July and August when the temperatures will climb even higher and I basically melt into the asphalt. Fall can't get here soon enough for me. But listener, that's enough of me complaining about how much I think summer is literally the product of the heat miser from the Rankin and Bass stop-motion classic, The Year Without a Santa Claus. No, you want me to talk about today's book. Tensions between the New Republic and the Avatha reach a fever pitch, and war cannot be avoided. But with Nil Spar threatening to execute Han, will Leia be able to hold her government together? Or will she back down in order to save her husband? It's Tyrant's Test by Michael P. Cube McDowell, the third and final book in the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy. And I'll talk about the book coming up in just a few moments. But first, it's listener question time. Today's email comes from Dawson, who says, "Hi Aaron, my question is sort of a character group. If you could pair any master with any apprentice, regardless of era or force inclination, who would it be? I think Darth Bane and Palpatine would be an interesting combination, like if Qui-Gon Jinn was master to Jacen Solo. What if Darth Plagueis was apprenticed to Bane? Or if Sidious was taken in by the Jedi and apprenticed to Yoda? I'm curious to see who you would pair up." Well, thank you very much for the question, Dawson. It's not something I've ever really thought about. But the first answer that came to mind was Anakin teaching Luke and Leia. Now, I know what you're going to say. This pairing probably goes against the Jedi's rules about attachment and taking multiple Padawans. But I'm going to disregard all of that for just a minute. Imagine if Anakin had never became Darth Vader and instead became a Jedi Master, and he and Padme raised Luke and Leia in a stable, loving family. Yes, the Jedi Council would have flipped its lid over Anakin having a family, but even if they banished him, I like to imagine that Anakin would still want to teach his children in the ways of the Force. I think Anakin would try to teach Luke and Leia to always try to do what they think is right and to always listen to what their guts tell them. Conversely, I think Luke and Leia would be good for Anakin. Luke could show his father the value of being compassionate to others, and Leia could show Anakin the value of understanding to come to a decision that benefits as many people as possible, but without compromising your most fervent beliefs. And come on, who wouldn't want to see teenage Luke and Leia interacting with Uncle Obi-Wan and Aunt Ahsoka, while Grandpa Yoda chuckles and shakes his head every time the twins do something to annoy their father? This might be the first Star Wars what if I would actually want to see. Thanks again for the question, Dawson. Now, listener, if you have a question you'd like me to answer on the show, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And if you'd like to get your voice on the show, just record a short message and email it in. But please record it in MP3 audio format. Now it's time for today's book, Tyrant's Test by Michael P. Cube McDowell, the final book in the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy. Grab yourself a drink, and let's head in to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. The story begins on Kashyyyk. Chewbacca is watching his son, Lumpy, undergo his coming-of-age ceremony and earning his new name. They descend below the canopy of the great Roosher trees, and Lumpy begins hunting for a predatory Katarn. But the hunt is interrupted when one of Chewie's cousins tells them that Han has been taken captive by the Yvetha. Chewie says he has to leave. His life debt to Han supersedes his role in his son's coming-of-age ceremony. But Chewie's wife, Malatobuk, gets him to reluctantly agree to take Lumpy along on the rescue mission. Together, father and son, along with 3 of their cousins, board the Millennium Falcon and head off to the Connacht cluster. On Coruscant, Chief of State Leia Organa Solo faces a vote of no confidence from the Senate's ruling council. And it's one of Leia's oldest allies who has pushed the petition for consideration, Senator Domin Barus of Elodia. Barus worked closely with Bail Organa during the days of the Republic. He's known Leia since she was a teenager. When Leia asks why he has brought the petition of no confidence, Barus tells her that she can't be expected to maintain a level head while her husband is being held prisoner by the enemy. The situation is too difficult for anyone. Barus lays out his concerns to the full ruling council, and the vote goes against Leia, 6-3. Her position as Chief of State and President of the Senate will now go before the full Senate. Elsewhere, Luke Skywalker and Akana continue on the trail of the Falanasi. Their destination, the planet Chitapatan, located just inside the Connacht cluster, and one of the planets they fear the Yvetha attacked during the cleansing weeks ago. Luckily, there aren't any Yvethan vessels in orbit around Chitapatan, and Luke is able to land Akana's ship without incident. But what they find is ghastly. The ruins of a Hakig temple complex and the remnants of charred bodies strewn across the ground. Luke worries that this is the end of the trail. Either the Falanasi fled the planet before the Yvetha attacked, or the colony was wiped out. No, Akana says. They're here. I can feel them. Luke watches as Akana starts walking away from him, and then she disappears. Admiral Akbar is tired of waiting. It's time to learn more about Yvethan battle tactics. He orders General Abbott to attack an uninhabited planet in the Connacht cluster where New Republic intelligence believes one of the former Imperial shipyards is still orbiting. General Abbott orders Commodore Turk Brand to lead a small task force to attack planet ILC 905. The task force consists of 2 battleships, the Indomitable, a heavy cruiser, and the Vanguard, a smaller gunship, as well as 3 squadrons of E-wing fighters and K-wing bombers. When the task force arrives at ILC 905, Brand finds the station guarded by 2 large Yvethan thrust ships. Brand orders Vanguard to guard the rear as Indomitable advances on the station. The bombers launch, with the E-wings providing escort. They engage the first thrust ship when suddenly 2 more emerge from hyperspace behind the task force, trapping them. Vanguard tries to cover Indomitable, but the gunship is no match for the larger Yvethan vessels. Vanguard explodes, leaving Indomitable alone and surrounded. The battle appears lost when one of the K-Wings notices a hole in the area where the shields of the two thrust ships guarding the shipyards overlap. The bomber launches everything it has into that overlap, and the shipyard explodes. The detonation takes out one of the Avathan thrust ships, and it plunges onto the planet below. The remaining 3 thrust ships flee the system, and Commodore Brand orders what's left of his task force to return to the 5th Fleet. Following the battle, Nil Spar orders Han brought before him. The Viceroy doesn't say a word. He simply turns on a recorder and begins pummeling Han, beating him mercilessly until Han can no longer stand on his own. Leia and the Senate ruling council watch in horrified, stunned silence. Nil Spar orders Han taken back to his cell. The Viceroy wipes the blood off his hands, turns to the recorder, and growls, "Leave Cornoct now." Meanwhile, Lando Calrissian, Lobot, R2-D2, and C-3PO discover the secret of the Telgecon Vagabond. The ship isn't a warship, or a time capsule, or a wandering museum. It's a lifeboat containing the Kayla's genetic material and the instructions for how to bring their frozen planet back to life. And now it seems the Vagabond has decided to return to where it was created. Colonel Pakpakat realizes where the Vagabond is headed and arrives at Maltha Obex first to warn the New Republic archaeological team. Clear the surface of the planet. The Vagabond is about to arrive. Leia is shaken from seeing her husband's torture and needs advice. She visits her good friend and mentor, Mon Mothma, who is enjoying a quiet retirement, but she always has time for her favorite pupil. Leia asks the former Chief of State what she would do in her position. Order the 5th Fleet to attack and sacrifice Han, or retreat and save her husband's life. Mon Mothma says she can't answer that, only Leia can. But she needs to ask the right question. What is more important to her, getting Han home safely, or holding the Avatha to account for their actions? After the meeting, Leia heads to the Senate to face the vote of no confidence. But before the vote is taken, she takes the podium and addresses the entire body. She says she wants Han back, but not at the expense of her duty. Leia says she has ordered General Abbott to advance the 5th Fleet into the Cornoct cluster. His orders? To free any people the Avatha have taken hostage, arrest Nil Spar and the others who ordered the extermination of the citizens of the other inhabited planets, and to free the worlds the Avatha have conquered. The Senate is silent, astonished at Leia's words. Then, slowly, cheering begins, and soon it rumbles through the chamber. It's not everyone, but almost 3/4 of the senators in the hall are on their feet, applauding. Leia's support is obvious and overwhelming, and the vote of no confidence is finally withdrawn. Luke runs to the spot where Akana disappeared, but finds no trace of her. For a moment, Luke wonders if the woman was always a figment of his imagination. But no, Akana is real. That means the Falanasi are real too, and they're still here on Jetapatan. Luke concentrates, falling into the Force. He reaches out and feels something. He calls out, imploring the Falanasi to reveal themselves, and they do. Luke sees the ruins of the Hekeg temple dissolve. In its place, he sees a group of women, and behind them, the Hekig pilgrims continuing to build their sanctuary. Akana introduces Luke to the leader of the Falanasi, an older woman named Waialu. "You protected them," Luke says. "You hid the Hekig when the Yavatha came." "Yes," Waialu says. "Thank you for returning Akana to the circle. Now, you must leave." Luke doesn't understand. If the Falanasi can protect this settlement, why not help the New Republic defeat the Yavatha? Waialu says the circle abhors violence. They will not attack the Yavatha. But Luke doesn't want the Falanasi to fight the Yavatha. He has a plan to stop the war, hopefully without firing a shot. The Millennium Falcon arrives at Enzoth just as the Fifth Fleet arrives in the system. Chewbacca uses an old trick he and Han learned during their smuggling days to sneak next to the Superstar Destroyer, where Han is being held. They dock, and Chewie and two of his cousins board the Star Destroyer, while his son and another cousin wait in the Falcon. The Wookiees find Han in one of the cargo holds. As they fight their way back to the Falcon, one of the Wookiees is shot and killed. Chewie calls back to the ship, telling it to go, but before it can disconnect, Lumpawarump leaps through the breach and runs to save his father. Lumpawarump comes up behind the Yavatha who are keeping the Wookiees and Han pinned down. He attacks, killing two of the aliens and drawing their aim, allowing Chewie to dispatch the others and giving the Wookiees a clear path back to the Falcon. Elements of the Fifth Fleet arrive at nearly 30 worlds of the Kornak cluster, where the ships of the Yavathan fleet are stationed. General Abbott takes his battle group to Enzoth to confront Nil Spar. But before the fighting begins, even more New Republic ships arrive. Hundreds of them. Almost every New Republic warship appears from hyperspace, ready for battle. "What is happening?" Nil Spar demands. "Where did all of these ships come from?" The Viceroy orders his ships to attack, but something weird is going on. Many of the Yavatha's turbolaser bolts pass right through the New Republic vessels. It's an illusion. One of the Falanasi are with each task force, and the women are projecting images of more New Republic ships than are actually there. The Yavatha continue to attack the New Republic fleet, but they never suspect the most dangerous threat would come from within. When the Yavatha overthrew the Empire at the end of the Galactic Civil War, they took hundreds of Imperials as slaves to work on the Black Fleet. The surviving Imperials take advantage of the situation and put into motion the plan they developed years ago. They activate dormant programs they installed throughout the Black Fleet, rendering the ships unresponsive to the Yavatha. The Imperials then attack their Yavathan masters, killing them, and jumping the Black Fleet out of the Kornak cluster, heading to the Galactic Core. The story ends at Maltha Obex. Luke arrives and helps Colonel Pakpakat rescue Lando, Lobot, and the droids from the Telgcon Vagabond. Finally home, the ship dives through the planet's atmosphere and plunges into the ice. It will take years, maybe centuries, but the rebirth of the Kayla has begun. Luke uses a Falanasi illusion to hide the impact of the Vagabond, leaving the world to return to life in peace. Time to take a break. When we return, I'll talk more about Tyrant's Test. I'm Aaron Moats. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. Thank you for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, where we celebrate the books from Star Wars Legends. But let me take a moment and recommend a book from Star Wars canon, Thrawn Alliances is the story of how the Grand Admiral first met Darth Vader. The two team up to stop an Imperial threat on the backwater planet Batuu. The mission causes Thrawn to remember a trip he made to Batuu for the Chiss Expeditionary Forces, and Lord Vader reminds him an awful lot like a young Republic general he met there years before. Check out Thrawn Alliances by Timothy Zahn. Welcome back to the Star Wars Legends Lounge, the show that celebrates the books from Star Wars Legends. I'm Aaron Moats, and today I'm talking about the book Tyrant's Test by Michael P. QB McDowell, the third and final book in the Black Fleet Crisis trilogy. The first thing I'll say about this book is I preferred its structure much more than I did the structure of the second book, Shield of Lies. As many of you remember, I talked about how that book was divided among the three storylines. We got all of Lando's story first, then we got Luke's, then we got Leia's. In this book, the stories are interwoven. You get a chapter from Luke, a chapter from Leia, you get a chapter from Lando, you get a chapter from the Yvetha, and that structure helps keep my attention better than the way the second book was written. Once again, I think the most interesting plotline in these books is Leia's story, specifically dealing with the politics on Coruscant, the politics mixed up with the military attack on the Cornacht cluster, and how Nil Spar and the Yvetha are trying to manipulate and take advantage of the situation. It really makes the reader think about what they would do in the situation that Leia finds herself. Here she is, the Chief of State of the New Republic, the President of the New Republic Senate, and the Commander-in-Chief of the New Republic Armed Forces. However, she's also a wife and mother. Han has been taken captive. Nil Spar and the Yvetha are demanding that the Fifth Fleet move away from the entrance to the Cornacht cluster and allow the Yvetha to rule themselves. If Leia orders the Fifth Fleet to return to Coruscant, the Viceroy says that he will release Han. However, New Republic intelligence knows that the Yvetha have massacred, have exterminated the sentient beings on the other worlds inside the Cornacht cluster. It's one thing for the Yvetha to say they want self-determination. They want to be in charge of their own destiny. They want to rule themselves. If they would just stick to Enzoth, their home world, and some of the other uninhabited worlds of the Cornacht cluster where they could set up colonies, I honestly think that Leia and the New Republic would grant their wish. But the Yvetha have not granted the other sentient beings of the Cornacht cluster the same ability to make their own decisions that they want. The Yvetha believe every star system in the Cornacht cluster are theirs. That's what their histories, their religions, their folklores tell them. Even though 5 other sentient species have developed in the cluster, the E12 believe that they are the rightful rulers. So what is Leia to do? She's terrified that if she orders the 5th Fleet into the cluster to try and bring some sort of justice to Nilspar and the E12, that Han will be executed. She also is terrified that if she backs down, if she orders the 5th Fleet to return to Coruscant, it is granting Nilspar and the E12 the autonomy that they seek to continue cleansing the worlds of the Coronat cluster from anyone else who may be living there. Now, honestly, I don't think Leia cares too much about the way she is perceived by the other senators, but it would be a consequence of her ordering the Black Fleet back to Coruscant. If Nilspar actually released Han back to Leia, then effectively she could not be the chief of state. The other senators, the other worlds of the New Republic, would see that she cares more about her family than she cares about doing the right thing for the New Republic. Again, I don't think Leia cares as much about the way she is perceived as actually doing the right thing, but it would be a consequence. And yes, she would have to be removed as chief of state. So the soap opera going on in the halls of the Senate is the most intriguing story in this book for me. In the previous 2 books, I was really interested in Lando's storyline with the Telj Vagabond. The storyline wraps up here. Lobot discovers that the ship is carrying all the genetic material for the Kayla. That the ship is simply waiting for some sort of message in order to return home to Maltha Obex. And hopefully to bring the world and the Kayla species back to life. I didn't find the storyline as interesting in this 3rd book as I did in the first 2. And maybe that's because I preferred the mystery. When we finally learn the reason the Telj Vagabond was created and what its mission was, there was no longer this question of what is happening? What is this ship? What's its purpose? Honestly, the answer is pretty cool. It's just once you have that answer, in my opinion, the reader can kind of see what's coming. And I think maybe that's why this storyline was just a little bit of a letdown for me in this book. Again, it's a really cool answer to the mystery of the Telj Vagabond. And I would love to see a story about the Kayla. But according to the book, it's going to take maybe centuries before life returns to Maltha Obex. Unless we jump ahead 200 years in the timeline, we're not going to see anything else about this ship and about this species. It's also just interesting to me that this storyline doesn't connect to the other two storylines in this trilogy. You know, I said on the last episode that this is the third or fourth time I've read the Black Fleet Crisis, but it's been at least 15 years. So I could not remember how the plot line featuring the Telgecon Vagabond ended. And I speculated a little bit on how I thought it would connect to Leia's story and to Luke's story. And it turns out it really doesn't. The only connection is at the very, very end when Luke shows up to Maltha Obex to take the droids back. And after he learns what is taking place on the surface of the planet, he uses one of the teachings of the Falanasi to create an illusion covering the impact of the Vagabond on the surface, and thus allowing what is going to happen in its own time, at its own pace, and free from the influence of anyone else in the galaxy. Now, speaking of Luke, I enjoyed the way his storyline progressed in this book much more than I did in Before the Storm or Shield of Lies. I never believed that Luke was going to find any information about his mother. I remember reading this part of the trilogy way back in the 90s, and the one storyline that I never thought was going to have a satisfactory conclusion to was Luke finding out information about he and Leia's mother. Of course, that's because these books were written before the release of the prequel trilogy. However, once Luke and Akana find the Falanasi shielding the Hakig pilgrims who are building their holy sanctuary, some of the debate between Luke and the Falanasi, particularly Wyalu, is really thought-provoking. Wyalu asks that once a Jedi Master has gained enough knowledge and understanding of the Force, why still carry a lightsaber? Now, we know that a lightsaber is more than just a weapon, but a weapon is still one of its roles. A Jedi tries to use their lightsaber only as a last resort. And Wyalu poses the question, why does violence even need to be that last resort? The Falanasi use the white current to protect the Hakig pilgrims. The Falanasi could have used their powers in defending the Hakigs to defeat the Yavatha that landed on Jetapatan. However, they found another way to defend the Hakigs, one that didn't contain violence at all. They simply hid them. I'm not saying the Falanasi are correct. I do believe that there are times dire circumstances where a Jedi needs to use their lightsaber. But it's a thought-provoking question. Why is there ever a need for violence, even in defense? Eventually, Luke convinces Wyalu that taking the side of the New Republic, will protect more lives in the long run than simply staying on Jetapatan, hiding the Hakigs. So Wyalu agrees to send a member of the Falanasi to accompany each of the task forces that General Abbott deploys throughout the Cornot cluster. And they use the white current to portray the task forces as much larger than what the Yavatha believe the Fifth Fleet to be. The hope is that in the face of overwhelming odds, the Yavatha may simply surrender. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. But the illusion is just the distraction that the Imperial slaves who have been working on the Black Fleet for 13 years need to fight back against the Yavatha. I've said it before on the podcast. In general, I believe Star Wars writes or shows beginnings of stories better than how Star Wars ends stories. The Black Fleet crisis is no different. This ending, for me, comes out of left field. We never spend any time with these Imperial slaves in the first two books or in the first 90% of this final book, Tyrant's Test. I understand what the author, Michael P. QB McDowell, is doing. He is having the Imperials do to the Yavatha the exact same thing that the Yavatha did to them following the Battle of Endor. It's as George Lucas has been quoted saying many times, it's like poetry, it rhymes. However, for me, I think if you are going to do this, if this is how you're going to conclude your story, I think there has to be at least some foreshadowing, some allusion to it in the previous two books and throughout this final book. And I'm not saying that the ending to this story couldn't have been great. It could have been. It could have been fantastic. I just think it fell flat for me because of how much it felt it came out of left field. Just give me a little bit of foreshadowing. Reference the Imperials every once in a while. Show them working on the ships. Show the Yavatha treating them horribly. Just give me a couple scenes throughout the trilogy where the Imperials are simply interacting together in their cells. waiting for something to happen, waiting for somehow breaking free of the Avatha. If you give me that a couple times throughout the trilogy, I think I really would have enjoyed the ending. But it almost felt to me that the author didn't want to end the story with Leia getting too much blood on her hands. Well, it's time to go, listener. If you have something that you'd like to share with me, a question, an opinion, or a comment, you can send me an email at swlegendslounge@gmail.com or send me a message on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at swlegendslounge. And don't forget to send in your favorite Star Wars character groupings. I haven't gotten one of those in a few months, and I love reading them. Now, coming up on the next episode, I'll jump back about a decade to talk about another short story compilation, Tales from the Empire. You can look forward to that episode coming out on June 27th. Thank you so much for listening to the Star Wars Legends Lounge. I'm Aaron Moats. May the Force be with you. And remember, there's always a bit of truth in legends.